All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for this, the last seminar of our seminar series for this semester, and hopefully the last virtual one. So I'd like to introduce two speakers today. So J.D. Yoder is the Dean of the College of Engineering at Ohio Northern University. And Blake Hylton is an assistant professor of mechanical engineering and the coordinator of the first year engineering experience at Ohio Northern. And they're going to be talking to us about infusing the undergraduate experience with the entrepreneurial mindset. So should be pretty interesting. And thank you both for joining us. Thanks again to everybody for being here on Friday. And JD or Blake, please take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and take 1 minute to share a screen here. And please don't hesitate to interrupt us at any time with questions. We do have some time planned at the end as well. Thank you for the introduction. As you said, I currently serve as Dean of the T.J. Small College of Engineering at Ohio Northern, which you'll hear us just refer to as ONU going forward.
And I'm Blake Hylton, soon to be Associate Professor of Mechanical Engineering from August. So, and I also coordinate our first year engineering.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So thanks very much to all of you for taking the time on the last day of class. Congratulations on making it to the end of what will hopefully be the strangest academic year in our careers. It's an honor for me to be here. I've had the chance to interact with a few of you before and have a lot of respect for your department. This is kind of random, but I saw Greg Buckner's name show up here, and many years ago, I won't say how many, he and I met when we were honored with the SAE Teeter Award. And just as a frame of reference, this is my 20th year at Ohio Northern, my 4th year as Dean, but I was an entrepreneur before coming to academia and then worked in industry for a while as well. So I want to tell you just a bit about ONU. It's a private, largely residential, comprehensive university with just under 3,000 students. It's located in the village of Ada, Ohio, in rural Northwest Ohio. It consists of 5 colleges, including arts and sciences, business, pharmacy, and law. One of the advantages of being a small rural campus is we have been in person all year with lots of restrictions, obviously. And we're in the last day of classes as well. ONU was founded 150 years ago, and we've been doing engineering for 140 years now. College of Engineering is undergraduate only, focuses on hands-on, interactive learning, and environment with small classes that allows faculty and students to interact. College is spread across 6 majors, has 570 students and 28 faculty. We're fortunate to have recently moved into the 110,000 square foot James Laird Kennedy Engineering Building, which provides space and environment that matches our core values. We're kind of focused on personal relationships, great opportunities for the students, lots of engagement, and personal development for faculty, staff, and students. Biggest thing students wanted in the building was natural light, so we've got a 3-story atrium through the heart of the building. We're very hands-on focused. Obviously, all these photos are pre-pandemic. Lots of space for projects. Lots of classrooms focused on hands-on and active learning, which I bring up partly because we just like to talk about the new building, but mostly because the design of this building was kind of influenced by our work with Keene. So I was asked to speak to you today about our work within the Kern Entrepreneurial Engineering Network, or Keene. This is a program funded by the Kern Family Foundation in Waukesha, Wisconsin. I'll be focusing on the work we did related to mechanical engineering curriculum at ONU, but there have been lots of efforts that we'll mention as well. And I definitely don't want to give you all the impression as we look in hindsight that this was a clear and clean path. Our campus is surrounded by cornfields, so this image always seems appropriate for how we started. A muddy, windy road, and we couldn't really see where we were heading. And just to be clear, this is not part of our campus. We were working with a network of other engineering schools, 12 schools initially, to improve undergraduate engineering education by instilling the entrepreneurial mindset in our students. These efforts really started way back in 2005. The initial efforts were hampered by the fact that we were trying to do the work while at the same time setting direction, definitions. So while, for example, today I can tell you that all of our faculty have been engaged with Keene in the College of Engineering and in other areas on campus as well. And really all but one or two are really on board. This began with 2 faculty, myself and someone in business. About half a dozen years after working towards this, a change in leadership at the foundation, had Dr. Doug Melton, who had been an academic, become a program manager at Keene. He worked with the network to create a framework which has been very important and is really based on the sentence shown here. I've highlighted what we view as kind of the key words, and I'll come back and talk more about the entrepreneurial mindset in a bit. Obviously, I think engineering thought and action is what engineering schools have been focused on and good at for a very long time. But in the past decades, and based on listening to industry and ABET as a sector, we've done more in the areas of teamwork, collaboration, communication, and ethics, which is obviously, closely related to character. There are lots of people that talk about the entrepreneurial mindset, lots of different definitions for that. But within Keene, we describe this as trying to nurture curiosity in our students, help them see connections between topics, courses, disciplines, and help them develop a relentless focus on creating value. To me and to many others in the network, this combination of the engineer we need and the entrepreneurial mindset is a great summary of what has been discussed around engineering education for decades. That successful engineers need more than just great technical education to really thrive. One of my advisory board members pointed out to me that this effort summarizes something he has told young engineers over and over. Successful engineers need to understand that engineering projects get done for business reasons, not just because they're cool projects. I think this also gets at something that I hope all of our graduates attain. Historically, we've described engineers as problem solvers. And to some people, that gives kind of the Dilbert-like impression that you're sitting around at your desk waiting for a problem to show up. Then you solve that problem and wait for the next one to show up. I don't think that's what any of us want for our graduates. We want them engaged in the whole process and deciding which problems are worth solving.
And I think that's really an important distinction with what we're trying to do with Keene, because the entrepreneurial mindset, at least as we've talked about it, isn't necessarily focused on exclusively that startup entrepreneurship in the traditional business sense, although that's certainly a possible piece of it. Instead, it's really focusing more about encouraging and training our students to think entrepreneurially, even if what they're actually doing is maybe a little bit more intrapreneurial, right? As you're innovating within the company and coming up with new projects, new ideas, things like that. So the challenge for us as the educators then is, how do we foster and develop something as fuzzy and ill-defined, kind of squishy as a mindset, especially one that something like this, some of these aspects aren't something we're used to talking about in a more traditional technical engineering course. And so what does it mean for a student to be curious in my classroom, or to demonstrate value creation in a heat transfer class, right? So where the network seems to be coalescing, right? This whole thing has been an iterative process as the network has come together and started thinking about what this really means. And where we seem to be landing, at least right now, is embracing this framework, the 3 C's here, as a kind of Rosetta Stone, a common point on top of which we as different institutions can overlay our own institutional brand and meld it in with this entrepreneurial mindset concept that we've all been talking about. So at some point early on in an institution's adoption of entrepreneurial mindset content, there needs to be some sort of conversation around kind of what do we mean in the context of our curriculum and our mission when we say curiosity or connections, creating value. What's our brand of the entrepreneurial mindset? And like any good engineering problem, this is something that needs to be iterative, right? As faculty continue to gain more experience in talking about these things, they're trying out new ways to talk about it in their classroom. They're exploring what other institutions and other colleagues are doing. You need to keep revisiting this conversation about what EM means to you and what it means in your classroom. So what we'd like to do today, part of our talk now, is give a little bit of a jump start to that conversation with a quick activity. So what we're going to do is start with a little bit of kind of individual time for you to ideate before we jump into some further conversation. We'll practice some active learning here, practice what we preach. So what I want you to do is think about your students. Think about students that maybe you would say were curious, or students who you would say were good at drawing connections or good at creating value. What are the ways that you knew that individual was curious or created value or drew connections? What were they doing or demonstrating, or what made you know that about that individual? So we'll give you a couple minutes to think about it, and then we're going to break out and talk about it.
Thank you, Blake. So we're going to try to give you a little bit of background music here and see how that works. And we will check back in 3 minutes. hopefully that was about the right time. When we do active learning like that in the classroom, it's easy to tell when people stop writing. It's a little trickier here. Go ahead, Blake.
Yeah, so this next piece, now that you've had a little bit of time to think internally, let's spark some conversations, get people together and see where we can go. So we're going to kick you into breakout rooms for about 5 minutes. And when you're there, what I'd like you to talk about is, are there any items that you all identified through your brainstorming that are likely to make somebody a better mechanical engineer, and why or why not is that the case? So go ahead and have some of those conversations for about 5 minutes, and we'll pull you back.
Yeah, Jessica, you can go ahead with the breakout rooms. All right, looks like folks are heading
I don't
back
remember how
in.
many we had, but I think that timer probably would have expired at this point.
All right.
So sorry to cut everything off. I know that often there's good conversations come up, and 5 minutes is just about enough time to really get into a good conversation. But like I said, the goal here is really just to get you thinking, get those conversations started, and hopefully they'll continue after we're done. So I think first, now that you've thought about what it means for you, I want to, maybe we'll shift the conversation a little bit and talk about how EM came to evolve at ONU and how we went through the process of kind of institutionalizing that within and throughout our own programs.
So for us, going through a similar discussion, when we look at this list of 6 items, we had pretty broad support around these outcomes from faculty. In the early stages, we had faculty development opportunities, but honestly, our approach was pretty scattershot. Faculty who were engaged and interested would make some small changes to a few courses. While I firmly believe this benefited our students, the approach left a lot to be desired.
Mm-hmm. And it turns out this is a pretty common pathway towards embedding innovation of any kind in an organization. You've got the early adopters that start trying it out. They recruit some colleagues, support grows. And as you reach that critical mass of people that are bought into this idea, at some point you make a decision to institutionalize that innovation. And we, at this point, then hit that decision point to say, okay, we've got enough people, we've tried it out, this is what we're going to do.
And so in mechanical engineering, we wanted to take a more systematic approach to embedding these items in our curriculum. But first, we had to make this easy. I mean, asking an engineering faculty member, just go help your students be more curious. That's a challenging ask for most faculty. And that's actually true for the whole list. I just picked curiosity at the top. So we spent a full day retreat working to try to flesh out these outcomes a bit into something we could work with more easily.
And the end result of that was what has become known as the EKSOs, which is a pretty extensive list of more tangible classroom level, activity level objectives that, at least in our minds, distilled out the bits and pieces of the top kind of higher level list that you're looking at right now from the framework into what do we mean at ONU when we talk about curiosity, connections, etc.
As Blake said, that's an extensive list. I certainly don't expect you to read all these words on the screen, but just to give you an idea, we took each of those 6 and broke it down into lower level objectives. I'm going to be sharing the full list with you in a little while, so no need to try to look at that. And I want to be clear, this is not a definitive list. It's in flux. Other schools have used this list as is. Most have modified, added, removed. That's just fine. In some sense, that's what this is meant to be, as a conversation starter. Basically, to us, this is a list of outcomes we would like our graduates to have that fit into a particular category. And these tend to be much more readily accessible for faculty members. And I think we had planned to have this activity go 10 minutes. I want to leave plenty of time for questions, so we'll cut that down probably to 5 or 6 minutes. But I'm going to put a link in the chat here, and give me 1 minute to do that. And Blake, you want to talk to them about what they're going to do while I'm getting that chat ready?
Sure. So we're going to kick you back out into breakout rooms again. And I want you to pay attention when the little pop-up appears as to what room number you're in. There should be 6 rooms. And so that conveniently works out to the 6 different aspects of kind of the Keen framework. Make sure you've opened that doc before you go into the breakout room, because you won't have access, I don't think, to that chat. Maybe you will, I don't remember. Open it up now, why not? What I want you to do is take a minute to look at the list that we provided, all those different EKSOs, and there's a whole bunch of them. And think about, are there 1 or 2 of those that maybe you could address in one of your own classes? How would you do that? You're gonna be with a group, so talk about it with your group. Are there things that multiple people are resonating with? Are there things that maybe you teach a course that somebody else teaches the prerequisite or a follow-on course? Maybe you can identify a through thread around that outcome across your courses. Other things maybe that you see should be on the list that aren't. So just let's kind of let that conversation kind of grow out organically, but there's some guiding initial seeding thoughts. So
yeah, because you won't see the shared screen, these instructions are also in that Google Doc at the beginning. And the other thing I would say that often happens in discussions like this is people realize, maybe I'm already doing these things in my classes, and that's great. It's just a different way to think through and talk about what you're doing. So we're going to send you back to the breakout rooms for another, let's do 5 minutes, Jessica. Thank you. Okay, so thank you for participating in our 2 activities. Hopefully it's at least started some conversations, but where that led to for us was what you see here, which is a copy of our curriculum flowchart. I suspect you all have something very similar. But coded in orange are the items that, the courses that really were heavily modified for Keen objectives. And we wanted to have at least 1 per semester. You see almost every semester we have 2 or 3. Some of the other courses that aren't colored have still had impact, but these were kind of what we call a cornerstone of the Keen effort in each year. In addition to the Keen content, kind of something that has gone along with this is an awful lot of active learning, an awful lot of problem-based learning, which has really become the expectation of our students in all of our courses. There have been other efforts besides just curriculum, lots of student competitions, student-led pop-up workshops, lots of faculty development that Blake will talk about a little later, peer mentoring, alumni mentoring, and as I mentioned, some mini grants for additional courses.
So then the question kind of turns to what's the value of Keen beyond, obviously there's the content and improving our students and improving our outcomes for those students. But what's the value for me as a faculty member, or what's the what resources are out there that I can take advantage of? And I kind of structured this around a couple different things. So if you're looking for tools for learning about EM, what is this Keen thing that we're talking about? What do we mean by EM? I'd encourage you to take advantage of the Keen National Conference. Happens every year. Had been January, has now moved to February. There's sessions related to Keen that you can find at other venues. ASEE, especially in the entrepreneurship division, is often very heavy with folks implementing Keen. Venture Well. There's always workshops. So there's a lot of faculty development, as JD mentioned, around offered through Keen. In fact, so if you go, there's a website, engineeringunleashed.com. You can go take a look at that, and I'll talk more about it in just a second. But one of the many tabs on that site, or pages on that site, is about faculty development and how do I do EM in research? How do I do EM in my classroom? One of the more popular ones is the ICE, Integrating Curriculum and Entrepreneurship, or something like that. And it is a very good workshop, not just from getting introduced to Keen, but also introducing new faculty members to kind of active learning, problem-based learning, pedagogy in general. And I'll talk more about ICE later on. And then there's also just this great community of practice, right? Of having most individuals around the network are more than willing to talk about what they're doing with Keen. It's a very open, collaborative community. In terms of coming up with ideas for what to do in your own classroom, Engineering Unleashed, again, that website, engineeringunleashed.com, has, they call them cards, but it's basically a repository of Keen things that others have done, and then kind of put out there those activities that you can pull down and incorporate in your own courses. There's two references or resources out there for as you're actually looking to implement it. If you need a guide for that, there's tools like this here, which is something that the assessment working group around the network put together a couple years ago, just as a kind of a framework to thinking through how you might incorporate something related to EM. And then in terms of reporting and evaluating and improving that process, there's a lot of resources. You can find cards about it on Engineering Unleashed about how people have embedded it in their ABET process, tied their outcomes back to ABET outcomes. We use the FCARS, faculty course assessment reports. So there's a lot of resources out there that you can take advantage of.
Should point out that the network has grown quite a bit. From the 12 schools, we're now about 50. This slide's too busy, but I wanted to give you a sense for the range of schools. And Keen's much more than just the resources that Blake talked about. There's a lot of innovative educators out there that are working to improve undergraduate engineering education, and Keen is helping me meet a lot of them, which I'm personally grateful for. I've become friends with many of them, and I'm really grateful for that. And being part of the network has not just helped me, but it's certainly helped Ohio Northern. Of course, Keen is also a granting agency, and they have supported our efforts over the years. The advice I've always given schools interested in joining the network is this: make sure you really want to do this, and then the funding can help you get there. I would not recommend trying to work with the foundation just for the funding. When some schools have tried that, it typically hasn't worked out well for either party. But if your interests are aligned with Keen, the funding can be a great catalyst. Keen also does have a new RFP process that will likely result in several RFPs over the coming year. It is often possible to, even as an individual faculty member, to partner with a school that is a member of the network in responding to those RFPs.
Thanks. So I think closing stretch of this, and I want to make sure to be cognizant of time, so we have plenty of opportunity for questions, but one of the things that we were asked to talk about is what's the perspective for me as somebody who really jumped into this process midstream. When I joined ONU about 6 years ago, we were right at that stage of developing the EKSOs. So we'd made that decision that this is definitely what we're doing. We want to do it systematically. We want to do it holistically across the curriculum. And I got just dropped right into the middle of those rapids. So I want to talk about what that was like for me. So when I started, I wasn't new to teaching. I taught at Purdue as a grad student for several years prior to coming here. And so I wasn't new to that, but I was new to the faculty role and kind of what that looks like. And we were in the middle of this kind of big conversation about how do we overhaul, or not overhaul the curriculum, but how do we infuse EM into the curriculum? And as somebody who had an interest in engineering education, and I had a little bit of a background in that from grad school, it just looked like one, good pedagogy to begin with, and a lot of the EM elements just came with it. And so as I'm learning how to teach my classes and I'm being onboarded as a faculty member, entrepreneurial mindset wasn't this other. It was just presented as what we do. And so if we want to go to the next slide, JD, my path has, in many ways, Keen has been the kind of framework for my entire journey from onboarded new faculty member through now tenure and promotion. And it's been hugely valuable to me as a junior faculty member, trying to find my path and find my kind of professional identity and establish myself as a member of some broader community. So I started taking ICE, which is really kind of the initial foray in terms of professional development. I was just a new faculty member taking that and learning good pedagogy, learning about what EM was, and kind of helping me learn how to teach better. And that fed into some initial course modifications on my part, through our internal grant programs and some of the support we had from the foundation, and eventually grew into me actually coming back as a facilitator of those ICE workshops for a number of workshop offerings. And then through that, I eventually became kind of the go-to assessment person on the bench of ICE facilitators. And that grew into a major piece of my professional identity then. And thinking about what does assessment mean? How do we assess? What does evaluation, what's its purpose in education, right? And so that became a big piece of my work around the network and with the foundation. And I've been really involved in a lot of workshops around that in various formats. And then eventually, because of all of that I did diving into that, became honored this past January or February with the Rising Star Award, which is something awarded to a couple of faculty members around the network nationally, who are, I guess, in the opinion of the evaluators, up and comers in the space. And so it's really been, all of that is to say that it's been a real opportunity for me to enhance my teaching, to establish and enhance my scholarship, and build kind of a national profile as a faculty member and a member of our kind of professional community. And it's really infused itself, because of how I came into it, into really everything I do, and just how I operate is entrepreneurial mindset. And so I guess I'm living proof that if you keep at it long enough, eventually it will just permeate the culture and become a thing. So that's, I guess, the end of the tunnel, so to speak. So.
And with that, we're glad to take some questions now. I want to start by thanking Landon and Jessica for helping us with all the logistics, and thanking you for all of your time. If you have questions to follow up, you've got our email addresses there on the screen, or it's not that hard to find us. So thank you.
I have a question.
Of course. Let
so
me just,
this is Srinath.
Yep.
The question is, one of this, I mean, it's a great idea, and you know, our issue is scalability. We are a large class of students, and when you scale from the size of some of the schools that you're working with and your school, we are looking at 300 plus students in every class.
Mhm.
How do you scale it? How do you scale a program like yours with seamlessly? Not there'll be hiccups, but we don't want to minimize the hiccups if we want to make changes.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the great things about the network is there's a diversity of schools, right? So, yeah, our graduating classes are probably a third to half of your size, right? So, but I think if you look at Ohio State or Arizona State or Georgia Tech that are in the network, they'd be the same or maybe even larger classes.
Are they doing it for all their students, or are they doing it in a specific
Different
group?
schools are doing it different ways. So some are doing it for all, some are doing it throughout the first year, some are doing it in one department, right? So it varies by school. I think in terms of going throughout the network, we're probably, throughout the curriculum, we're probably more into it, and we started earlier than other schools. I think seamless is difficult, right? I think the reality is you need a few champions who do things in a few courses first. And then if that resonates and you see some success, then you start thinking about a bigger picture. But I would not try to start with anything like what we've done. I think you have to start with supporting a few faculty champions who want to try something innovative, and you see how it resonates with the students and with the faculty, and you move from there.
So one other question, quick question,
Yeah.
is one of the ways we kind of hinder innovative thinking is putting them in a room for an hour and making them test without a book, without any material. I find actually instead of being innovative, it becomes just a collection of information, and who collects information better and regurgitates in a test paper. So of course, our problem is that if we want to change the way we evaluate students on their mindset and their abilities, we have to change the way we are evaluating them and their knowledge, and not put them in a room and close it. And no company is going to say, I give you 1 hour, solve this problem, close yourself in a room, no books, you cannot check any books. But we make our kids do it every day.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that affects, from your research, how that affects the entrepreneurial mindset.
So I'll give two quick answers. I mean, Blake has just finished his course today. That's a competency-based assessment course rather than a kind of traditional testing. From my point of view, that is very much an individual faculty decision on how they run their course. But I would say that the work we've done with Keen has helped us be more open to all kinds of assessment methods in addition to kind of the traditional memorize and test.
Okay.
Blake, you want to add anything, or is that a...
Yeah, I think that the only thing I'll add is that it's not just teaching the entrepreneurial mindset, it's also embodying and living the entrepreneurial mindset. And so being curious about other ways is this the best way to do assessment? Are there better ways? Being willing to go out and try that and see what works and what doesn't work and kind of create the value through that. So really EM should be infusing not just what we teach, but what we do. And so I definitely think, like JD said, is, I'm experiment with more active and problem-based learning like we've done in our first year course, where I think they only take one exam in that course all year. It's mostly projects. And then my sophomore course that I teach is all competency or mastery based. And so, yeah, I think definitely there's ways up to the individual faculty member as to how deep they want to go, what they want to do, and what they see as the best way to cover their content. But I challenge to think creatively and innovatively.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I guess I can ask a question here. Yeah, I'm just curious, since you've started this program, I guess specifically at your university, have you seen an uptick in student-based startup companies or other faculty spinoffs and things like that?
Not particularly, no. I mean, as Blake said early on, we are not startup focused. There have been some. We had a senior design project last year that the person is now spun off into a startup. it has never been a focus for us to try to do that. Honestly, our student profile is much more likely to be folks who become entrepreneurs later in their careers, and that's just fine. It's more thinking about the value they're bringing in their job, whether that's, and for most of them, that's a traditional first job out of school. Marshall?
If you were to start over today, like think back to when you were virgin soil in terms of entrepreneurial mindset, and you were to start over today, like what would be your first step? Like, how would you do it? You've been through the process once.
I think the first 6 to 10 years were ineffective because the clarity wasn't there. And so I think being clear about what you're trying to accomplish at your institution and using that framework. And again, you never want to force anybody into this, right? I think when I have conversations with faculty, most of them maybe don't feel comfortable thinking about these topics, but do feel like their students would benefit from them, right? So I think the tools are much better now. There's this website that Blake mentioned where if you're teaching statics, you can find 5 other things that people did in statics or dynamics, right? So there's not the need to reinvent the wheel as we had often in the network that we'd find out afterwards that 4 different schools have been working to modify the same course, right? So I think leveraging the tools that have already been created and being clear about what you're trying to accomplish, Marshall, would be the 2 things I would focus on.
Thanks.
Well, thank you all so much, and congratulations on making it to the end of this semester. And certainly don't hesitate to follow up with either one of us if you have questions going forward. We're excited about this. We love to talk about these things and love to see more faculty engaged. So thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you both for speaking. Very interesting talk. I appreciated the interactive nature of it. You know, most of our seminars are not that way. It's kind of just sitting here listening. So I certainly appreciate that.
Nothing
thank you both.
Nothing worse than an hour of PowerPoint about active.
Yeah.
Hey, just real quickly, great presentation, Blake and John David. This is Greg Buckner, and thanks for the shout out on the teeter. That was a long time ago.
We won't talk about how long ago that was, Greg.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Take care.